Growing up in the 90s and 00s, I read a lot of comic books growing up. One staple theme in American popular culture in the adventure stories was about doing the right thing. I don't really remember much of the specifics of any of the Spider-Man issues I read, but one short story was about Spidey saving people from a burning house, even though this was an era where the people in the New York City hated him, and everyone just started throwing rocks and trash at him when he showed up. Even though there was nothing for him to gain, and he was just risking his own life and well-being, plus the people were ungrateful for him on top of that, he did the right thing. Superheroes are a power fantasy, but Spider-Man was special in that the character really was virtuous in a way that others weren't, as he most of the time was down and out and his regular life was on the same level as any one of us normal people in the real world, and he didn't use his powers or talents to really better his life in any way, and he spent his energy on helping others on the level he could. I think Stan Lee, the creator of many Marvel superheroes, said that Spidey was the one hero that could inspire kids to be the hero they could be. Same kinds of themes appeared in American blockbuster movies, where the protagonist saves or helps the villain because it is the right thing to do, even though this act will later on endanger the hero and the others again. But in his hour of need, the villain deserves the help and has a right for a second chance to redeem himself. If memory serves, in Back to the Future Part 2, Marty saves Biff, and a similar scene happens in one of the Indiana Jones movies. Heroism is defined by helping others and doing the right thing despite the cost. In many more movies and American popular culture stories, there often is a scene when the antagonists do something horrible and the protagonists would be entitled to do something similar back, but then someone says, "We are not them, we have to do better." High morals and altruism carry the day. This is how heroism has been defined in recent times, but it isn't what we really desire from our heroes. I think that there are several things in play here in our psychology, and I'll start with Hegel's world soul. Looking at the world history, Hegel saw empires and kingdoms come and go. You could only stare at the process in awe, as the hopes and aspirations of individuals meant nothing, and the greatest cultures and civilizations were reduced to ashes, and one could walk among the ruins of what had been before. It is easy to feel depressed as you witness all this, Hegel stated in his lectures on the philosophy of world history, but Hegel used the example of a seed, quote, "The plant begins with the seed, but the seed is also the product of the plant's entire life, for it develops only in order to produce the seed. We can see from this how impotent life is, for the seed is both the origin and the product of the individual. As the starting point and the end result, it is different and yet the same, the product of one individual and the beginning of another." End quote. In world history, as the previous era crumbles and the next one starts, you don't just have a repetition of the same thing, but something new is added to the mix. All of this history was for something. There is a process going on here, and it will have an end goal. Man, the individual, has the task of knowing himself. Quote, "Man can only fulfill himself through education and discipline. His immediate existence contains merely the possibility of self-realization, i.e. of becoming rational and free, and simply imposes on him a vocation and obligation which he himself must fulfill. The animal's education is soon complete, but this should not be seen as a blessing bestowed on the animal by nature. Its growth is merely a quantitative increase in strength. Man, on the other hand, must realize his potential through his own efforts, and must first acquire everything for himself, precisely because he is a spiritual being. In short, he must throw off all that is natural in him. Spirit, therefore, is the product of itself." End quote. Man should aim towards the goal of growing the spirit, a meeting point between humanity's culture and learning and God. Man has intelligence, and this intelligence is the divine spark given to us by God. It will serve as the bridge for God to reconciliate with his creations, and humanity will become whole and one with God. When man woke up to consciousness in the beginning of history, he looked around and wondered at what he saw. What is all this? Who am I, really? The greatest goal is for a person to know himself, since he has all this potential, and through the individual, nations themselves will realize this same goal. Quote, "A nation comprehends its concept of itself and of the truth by means of scientific thought, i.e. the thought whose form corresponds to the concept of the spirit itself. If we attain an abstract comprehension of the deepest regions of the spirit, we do so by means of thought. The object, in this case, commensurate with the nature of the spirit. To this extent, the learned disciplines are the supreme culmination of a nation's life, for the nation's highest impulse is to comprehend itself and to realize in every area of its existence the concept it has formed of itself. The most important element is neither that of physical need, whatever its nature may be, nor that of formal justice, but of thought and of intelligence as such. Free, disinterested, dispassionate consciousness is the highest achievement of the nation, and the same is true in art." End quote. As a side note, I would like to emphasize how similar Heidegger's Dasein or Nietzsche's will to power are to this thesis. Man needs to fulfill the space around him by himself in order to make it mean something, and in doing so his own identity develops, like in Dasein, and his own will in fulfilling is the key aspect, like in will to power. A big theme with Hegel is that beings and things in the world can only exist through their relation with other things and beings, and only God himself can purely exist as himself. Other big theme is a circle that will close in on itself and either become whole or create something new. God, for one, is the Father, the universal, but a being that is still enclosed within itself. But he also is the Son, another version of himself, and thus he is his own subject. As God knows himself and contemplates himself, he creates spirit. Humans can have access to this spirit, and it will serve as the highway for the great process of world history. For Hegel, other cultures like the Chinese or the Indians have highly developed philosophies, but they fail to go all the way, as they don't realize the goal of human freedom. Later on, communism took this same model, as in history is clearly a process that will lead to an ultimate endpoint that will free us all, and in the 90s Francis Fukuyama took this model again for liberal democracy, being the endpoint where history will end its development. A world soul, then, is a one great person that will accelerate this process in great leaps. Spirit manifests itself through this person. Hegel lived in the times of Napoleon and even saw him ride by once in 1806. Like a hurricane, a world soul will wash over the world, and as a vessel for the great process, he can't settle for happiness and find a peace in himself, as he is driven by powers greater than him. Once all is done and the vessel has been spent, history will throw him away just like everyone else, as Napoleon was sent into exile or Julius Caesar was assassinated. The violence and chaos brought on by these individuals is understood by Hegel as an inevitable byproduct. Quote, "Thus the individual organism produces itself. It makes itself actually what it already was potentially, and the spirit too is only what it makes itself. For it likewise makes itself actually what it already was potentially. But the development of natural organisms takes place in an immediate, unopposed, and unhindered fashion, for nothing can intrude between the concept and its realization, between the inherently determined nature of the germ and the actual existence which corresponds to it. But it is otherwise in the world of the spirit. The process whereby its inner determination is translated into reality is mediated by consciousness and will. The latter are themselves immersed at first in their immediate natural life. Their primary object and aim is to follow their natural determination as such, since it is the spirit which animates it, is nevertheless endowed with infinite claims, power and richness. Thus the spirit is divided against itself. It has to overcome itself as a truly hostile obstacle to the realization of its end. That development which, in the natural world, is a peaceful process of growth, for it retains its identity and remains self-contained in its expression, is in the spiritual world at once a hard and unending conflict with itself. The will of the spirit is to fulfill its own concept, but at the same time it obscures its own vision of the concept and is proud and full of satisfaction in the state of self-alienation. Development, therefore, is not just a harmless and peaceful process of growth like that of organic life, but a hard and obstinate struggle with itself." End quote. As another side note, this resembles Freud's death drive, where there is a will and a force in materia itself that wishes for destruction. Such is the world spirit. But what about heroism? The time period from the fall of Napoleon to the beginning of the world wars was obsessed with the man. One unknown Corsican came out of nowhere and conquered all. The emotions that rose to the heights were mixed, ranging from fear and loathing to admiration and deification. People in general at the time and throughout history have seen monarchs and emperors as the representatives of God on earth, and many have stood in admiration and awe to their sovereigns, dedicating their lives for the service of their masters. The novel War and Peace portrays very well the absolute passion one of the characters, Nikolai Rostov, has for the Tsar, and later leaders and dictators like Stalin or Mao elevated themselves to the same heights in order to gain the same adoration from the people. With Napoleon, the effect was supercharged as his rise to power was so quick and total. Once a man gains this status, becoming basically a demigod among men, all is forgiven. Like Hegel, he forgives the destruction caused by Napoleon as he sees the emperor as a world soul, and in the novel Crime and Punishment, the protagonist Raskolnikov justifies the murder he has committed by stating himself as a great man, just like Napoleon. In the stories of popular culture, we love our anti-heroes. There is a bite and toughness in them, as they wield a ruthless power, but deep down there is a tiny spark of something good, and they aren't completely irredeemable. If they are, we will love them as villains, as people are drawn to someone or something with power. The Werner Herzog documentary Grizzly Man follows the last days of conversationist Timothy Treadwell, who keeps living in close proximity to grizzly bears, until he meets his end by one of the bears. Treadwell was a troubled man, and he was drawn to these animals as they were strong and noble and beautiful, and he constructed an inner world where he was somehow protecting and helping them, even though he subconsciously was trying to become one of them and channel their strength and perfection, qualities he felt that he was lacking. Similar situation could be seen in the Netflix series Tiger King, which followed people who raised and kept tigers. The huge predators pulled like magnets weird and broken people towards them, as if they somehow could get a piece of that strength for themselves. In the world of sports, you can see the same effect. People were drawn to great boxers like Mike Tyson, who became even more marketable after his SA charges. Strong, violent men are doing things that we don't condone in our societies, but as they are capable of these acts, they inspire awe as they do these bad things anyway, something that normal people would or could not do. In chess, the same is happening intellectually. A strong player can publicly break and dominate a person over a game board, and people were drawn to the chess champion Bobby Fischer the same way as they were to Mike Tyson. Chess became a huge deal during the Cold War, since if Americans couldn't defeat Soviets in an intellectual game, how were they going to do it in real life? People wanted reassurance from the strength of Bobby Fischer. In Nietzsche, this adoration of strength reaches higher levels. He saw Christianity and the democratization of nations as pandering to the herd instinct. A society would sink to the lowest common denominator, and morality would suffocate the great souls in our midst, the ones who were willing to go all the way to reach greatness, not caring much about the hindrances created by the masses. Again, we see the callback to Napoleon, and Nietzsche himself was a sickly, bookish person who was in too bad of a shape to hold on to a day job. So strength is number one, but welded into this to a lesser extent and in a somewhat perverse way is kindness and goodness. Napoleon was a ruthless and draconian man, but he loved his family to a fault, as their foolishness damaged his own interests. He remembered people who had been good and fair to him along the way, and he gave those people money, opportunities and jobs, no matter how small of a role they had played in his life. He wasn't completely without sympathies for the common man, even though he saw that the regular people should bow down to the upper classes and to the emperor, and he maintained that wars should be conducted quickly and swiftly, so the suffering of the people would be over as soon as possible. These traits, however, can possibly be seen as a mark of his shrewdness as a ruler, as Machiavelli stated that people should be either treated generously or be destroyed, as they will have their revenge over small slights since they can't over big ones. When generosity and good treatment is given by a man of strength, the individual is reduced to a state of a child. Common criticism of Christianity is the infantilization it causes, as God is treated as this big bearded man in the sky, and our relationship to him is the same as what we had to our real fathers when we were little kids. The God of the Bible is also a violent and powerful being that can punish those that offend him without a second thought. Deep down we want to be kids, since the world is a big and a scary place, and we have a need for someone strong being out there for us. This relationship can very easily fall into a state resembling a Stockholm syndrome, or a child's relationship to an abusive dad, but it happens on the level of nations and empires, as the citizens will look up to their leaders and religious institutions in a twisted way. The stories of popular culture lifted to a status of a hero and altruistic man of the people, carrying in it the seed of the stories about Jesus. Jesus came here to offer sympathy and relief for the downtrodden and oppressed. And it probably is one big reason for the popularity of Christianity, that someone cares in the cold, cruel world, but what we really want, subconsciously, is the one that oppresses. Collectively, we are all still the same caveman who first saw a bear in the woods and who made it a god for his tribe. Hegel saw a man of strength and he reacted the same way. Thanks for listening, have a good one.